introduce yourself and just give us a little background into SK.
Okay. Well, I'm Sarah Kathryne, and I'm a contemporary artist from Marietta, Georgia, so right outside of Atlanta. I've been full time for about a year now, which is just crazy how the time has flown. But I always laugh because people ask how I got started as an artist, and I feel like there is always a place for nature and nurture. So, from the nature side of things, I always came from an artistic bloodline. Both my grandmothers are super amazing artists. And actually, my great grandfather, whenever he came home from the war, went to art school. And so these are things I learned later in life, but it kind of started to make sense why I was naturally more artistic. And then on the nurture side of things, I came from a super creative household. So first of all, my parents are just amazing. They've been dating since they were in seventh grade and are just so in love. And so it was just my parents and I, my sister, and creativity was just always celebrated in our house. So my dad is an amazing musician. He can sing, he can play any instrument he picks up, and he was actually in a band as throughout my childhood. And so a lot of my early memories were going to his concerts and wearing little shirts that said my daddy's a rock star. And I just grew up around music. And then my mom was a school teacher, and she always encouraged my sister and I to write. And so we would always write thank you notes, or we would write for fun. I had a little journal that was called the Aspiring Writer's Journal. And so writing became a huge way that I processed life as a kid. And then I was always in ballet. I was a competitive dancer my whole life. And so would always express myself through dance. And so I had just tons of creative outlets around me. And so, just creativity became a way for me to process life, whether that was through music or through writing or through dance. And then, of course, there was art. My sister and I would watch PBS Kids in the morning, just like any other kid. But I feel like before, Arthur and all those little shows would come on, it was always Bob Ross. And so we would wake up at like 6 a.m. and watch Bob Ross. We are, but we just enjoyed doing that together. And so of course, we begged my parents for an art cabinet and just made a mess of our house every Saturday morning. And of course, just discovered our love for painting, both of us. And so some of my oldest pastimes with her are just painting together in the basement or drawing. And we were just always extremely creative kids. And so as we got older, of course, the Arthur turned into more HGTV, and we both learned our love for interior design. And as high schoolers, we would actually spend a lot of time together painting for fun in my parents' basement. And it's just a pastime that we kind of established together. And so, all to say, I've got it coming from all directions, and it's just always been my way of kind of navigating life is through several different avenues of creativity. So I didn't know if I wanted to do interior design or kind of what I wanted to do. And as I got older, I ended up going on a mission trip to this retreat called Blue Skies. It's a ministry and it serves families with kids with childhood cancer. It really just changed my life. And so it was actually at Blue Skies that I realized I wanted to be a nurse and wanted to care for children kind of navigating difficulty and parents going through that kind of hard time. And so I ended up always loving art and still doing art, but really pursuing nursing school. And so I went to Stanford University in Birmingham, and there I see why, hindsight's 2020. I met my husband, met Brett, and he played football there, but he was also in nursing school. And so we actually became nurses at the same time in 2020. I actually became a NICU nurse in the neonatal ICU with all the preemies and worked on night shift. You can imagine it's very tough. And so I would try to alleviate some of the family's pressures with little crafts to make them happy or little signs for the baby's room or just things to kind of celebrate their milestones. And so crafting for the families ended up kind of crafting for my coworkers. And
Yeah.
I had some coworkers that lost, babies during that time. And so I would paint their little heartbeats, or I would paint dogs or pets. And then that kind of turned into painting places. And so I painted a lot of houses. I remember sitting in my apartment, and I think I mentioned I was night shift, but I was really dying from the sleep deprivation. And so I was at my apartment one night painting some tiny little commission that I'd gotten from a coworker. And I just remember praying, I was so miserable, honestly, on night shift, and was just praying that I would feel just alleviated in some way. And I just felt like God told me, like, I will bless your art. And I've never heard him so clearly, but I was just like, I don't know what this is going to look like. And I mean, boy, have I learned now what he meant by that. But in that moment, I just started a little art Instagram, SK Isbell Art, and I followed everybody that I knew, probably like 5,000 people at the time. And since I've refined that a little bit as to not bother people that don't want to see, follow art accounts. But, anyways, I just kind of had the audacity to do it and just went for it. And so, Brett and I got married a couple years later and started travel nursing together. Went all over, lived in California for a little while, and we were nurses for a total of 4 years. And so, after that 4 year period, Brett decided to go into medical device sales, and that was very 9 to 5. And so he said, do you want to treat art like a 9 to 5? And so I was like, yeah, if you're telling me to, of course I will. And so I left nursing and went full time art in July of last year. And it's actually been 1 year this week,
Gosh.
which is just crazy. And so it's just so neat because I feel like I was able to heal the body for a period of my life. And now I'm able to kind of heal the soul through art. And so that's kind of how I got into it.
It's amazing. And I definitely want to dive into the journey of like being kind of new, I would still say full time and like
Yes.
what you've learned along the way. But I just love your background and I love how much you listen to yourself. Like you had the call to be a nurse, you did it and you did it for a while, but then you had just this gut feeling that you could do more with your artwork and you followed that. And I think both paid off beautifully. So it's that there's something there that like really listening to God and like listening to yourself and your gut or whatever, whatever that felt like inside of you has really paid off. And I think that's something more people need to hear. Like if there's something that continues to come up for you, you need to like tune into it in some way.
So true. I feel like life's just so short. And I think I got a really good glimpse of that, obviously being a nurse, but really
Mhm.
just with, life in general. I feel like so many people just do a job because they feel like that's what they're supposed to do or that's what they went to school for. And it is absolutely a risk to leave all of that to just, take this leap of faith. But it's amazing what's on the other side. And I'm so glad I trusted that gut instinct because it's gotten me here.
Can you talk about the beginning of going full time? So, what, maybe like a little bit before, a little bit after, when did you feel you were ready to actually take the leap? And then what was that kind of beginning? Oh my gosh, I'm full time. Now I have the whole day to myself. Like, can you kind of explain both of those time
Yes,
periods?
it was so weird. I was like, well, first of all, going from night shift nursing to day shift nursing, I was like, wow, I eat lunch at 12 p.m. and that's what a normal person does. And so you can only imagine not having to work 12-hour shifts anymore. It was just like, what do I do with my time?
Mhm.
And I definitely think there's a right time for everybody. And I think it's different for everyone, kind of whenever they have that gut check of, all right, it's time to go full time. I definitely wanted to ease into it. And so I didn't want to just jump ship completely until I knew it was viable. So what I did is I went part-time nursing. I felt like that was a really natural place to be. Brett was travel nursing full time and I wanted to go with him. So I was very part-time at my hospital in Atlanta. So whenever we got home, that was kind of a natural break of like, okay, I'm just going from part-time to full-time artistry, not just a total leap from one full-time to another full-time job.
Right.
So basically the way I navigated that was I started signing up for art shows just intermittently to see if my work would sell, and if so, what would sell. I signed up for the Scouted Studio Emerging Artist Show and joined the club and did some things like that to kind of test and see. I did Scott for the first time in Atlanta,
Mhm.
which is a very popular show here, and did it for April and May of last year, and then didn't go full time until July. So that was kind of a timeline. When I was nursing, I always had the desire to be a full time artist. I think I would sit at work on my lunch break and scroll social media and see all the people that were full time artists and just be like, man, that's just such a dream job. And what can I do now to kind of prepare myself if I know I want that to be my reality? I had seen this conference. It was the Southern Coterie Conference, which the TSC, the big letters, everybody kind of
Yeah.
recognizes it by that. But that took place in Sea Island and it was every January. So I really wanted to go January of 2024. And so I called one of my best friends, Eliza, in November of 2023. She is a small business owner and she had gone in the past. And I was like, Eliza, is it worth going? Should I wait and maybe go in 2025? I feel like I need another year to kind of prepare my Instagram and figure out my style and, had a million excuses. And she just said, SK, go before you're ready. And so I was like, all right, I'm not going to think twice. I'm just going to I'm just going to go. I signed up for the conference and I remember sitting there, and on the row with me were, probably 20 other business owners who I'd followed for years and years. And, they all have 50,000 followers, 100,000 followers. And there I am with like, my less than 1,000 and my dog portraits on my Instagram page. And I just remember kind of feeling like, what am I doing here? And I remember the first speaker stood up and she just said, I want everybody to have two sticky notes in their office. And I want the first one to say, if you're in the room, you deserve to be there. And she said, I want the second one to say, why not me? With a question mark. And I remember taking that to heart and just feeling this wave of peace come over me. Like, you know what? I deserve to be here and there's a reason I'm here. I do have a part to play in this and I have a seat at this table. And I'm going to just prepare myself as best I can. And so when I was at that conference, I learned so much. And I remember feeling so thankful that I had a business to nurture. That's all I wanted all those days when I was nursing. I just wanted a business to nurture and to grow. And I felt so thankful that I had one in my hands. And I remember one of the things I learned at that conference was hire what you don't know. And so I've stuck to that piece of advice even since then. But that's whenever I saw the ad for the art coaching club and I was like, I guess I'll hire a business coach. I don't know anything about that, but I will hire a business coach. And I remember it was before you restructured the club. And so we had a one-to-one call. And I remember you saying, you're like, yeah, I'm looking at your stuff and you're the perfect candidate. And I just remember feeling like, really? I am? And I just felt so validated in that moment. And so, one way or another, I was slowly growing my business before I even knew it would be a full time thing, and was kind of nourishing it and watering it while I was still nursing. And then once it started picking up and I was, making as much as I was making nursing, I felt like, okay, that's kind of my threshold to leave nursing once I know I can supplement that income. And sure enough, the time came a lot quicker than I expected, but it came indeed. And so, all to say, I think it looks differently for everybody, but that's kind of what it looks like for me.
I think that's amazing. And I think the jump before you're ready, like dive in, is something I'm such a proponent of. I think that's how my business was built. I think that's how any entrepreneur you talk to or artist or business owner would say the same thing. Like you're never going to feel ready. And I love this sticky note kind of metaphor because if you're in the room, you deserve to be there. But like odds are we probably don't feel like we do. And so I definitely am going to put those sticky notes on my wall. But I think so much of what you've accomplished has come from asking for help, but putting yourself out there as well and knowing that like there's a lot to learn, but I'm not going to learn it if I don't just try and start doing these things for myself. And I totally see how that's gotten you to where you are now.
Yeah, I think a lot of us artists, I mean, it's a vulnerable thing to put your art out there and just hope people like it.
Yeah.
It's something that a lot of us create in private. And so it does feel like you're putting yourself out on a pedestal and just hoping that people like what you're putting out. But I think I had to let go of a lot of that perfectionism and just realize if I wait for things to be perfect, that day is never going to come, And I think a lot of us just try to almost control the perception of our art. And at the end of the day, we can't control how people perceive it. And I think you've done a great job of telling us, our client is our client and your client is special, but it's not everybody. You have a very specific client, and it's okay if you don't paint for the masses, but you just paint for that one person that really resonates with what's inside you. And so I've realized that there's more value sometimes in audacity than in perfection. And that's really
Yeah.
something that I've tried to live by.
Can you talk about, because I think this is something really interesting to your story, how you have been selling your work because you matched your nursing income, which is obviously so impressive and surpassed it, I believe, many months too. But how are you actually getting your art out there? Because I think something that's a little different is you are doing shows. You're not selling all your work through a website. I remember when we had that first call, you didn't have any work for sale on your website, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, can we talk about that and how you're actually getting the word out and connecting with clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is something that's a little bit unconventional about me is I don't really sell on Shopify or my
Mhm.
Squarespace or anything like that. It's not necessarily on purpose. It's that, there's just a demand and I can only make so much inventory at a time. And I think there's something about that that kind of keeps it special and kind of keeps my art as a rarity. And so it's hard to come by, therefore, hopefully more valuable to people. And the in person shows have just been incredible. I feel like that's been the biggest factor in building my business. I feel like it's so important to build a client base that trusts you and that you build relationships with over time. And so my client base that I've gotten specifically through Scott's has just been amazing, coming to see me month after month, seeing what I have that's new, growing with my work. And I think in person shows sometimes are hard to get to. I understand that everybody lives in a different city, and so it's hard sometimes to find something convenient. And I feel very lucky to live in Atlanta where there is Scott's, which is a big designer market, but you get on the spot feedback right then and there. People are gravitating towards certain things and not gravitating towards other things. And so that's just been a wonderful, I just feel very thankful to have that experience and to be able to do Scott's every month. So in terms of advice, I guess I would say, try to find some shows near you. I understand that not every show is necessarily worth the effort. I understand sometimes the juice isn't worth the squeeze. But if you can find an interior design heavy show like Scott's, I know they have them obviously in Atlanta, in Ohio, there's a Scott's, but just something of that sort, whether it's Round Top or High Point or wherever you can get in front of the client that you want to get in front of. I feel like that's kind of allowed me to just sell my work in person and be an in-person business instead of an online business. And that's personally where I feel like I thrive a little bit more.
I feel like so many artists perked up because I think there's so much value to the online world and Instagram and all that. And we can get into that. But I just think those deeper connections really do happen in person. And like you said, people are coming back to your booth month after month. And that's kind of crazy to think about that like a month goes by and they're like, I have to go see her again. But like that's actually, I think, easier to have happen in person versus facilitating that online is difficult. Like, okay, we're sending another email, but an email doesn't feel as personal as like a hug. And so
Yes.
I think at any point in your career, kind of folding in some in person opportunities can be so helpful for that live feedback, for forming like real connections. I mean, I even know when you and I met in person, like it's different. Like meeting people in person is just so much more valuable than through a screen whenever possible, obviously. So I think that's something that I've seen totally take your business to the next level. And you're getting repeat customers and you have steady income from it, which I think is what all artists want. And I think it's really nice for the artists that maybe are a little burnout on the socials and the websites and all that. It's like there are other options. You don't have to do it that way.
I've learned that the online world will chew you up and spit you out. And, you're one of many. And I definitely think there's value. And we're so blessed to live in a society where we have that ability to connect online. But I think that there is a real lost art in just connecting in person.
Mhm.
And I understand that, not everybody is going to have the same access to shows every month. And I think that they can still, other artists can look around them at who their community is, who lives in their neighborhood, who they do see every month, family members that they, would love to bless with a piece of art and kind of build the community from who's already around them. I think that a lot of that is just trying to figure out what success means to you. And I feel like we talked a lot about this. And yes, of course, there's goals and there's milestones that you reach. But I think for me, success is in the relationships. And I always say, like, I'm a relationship business, art is just what I do.
Mhm.
And I think that, that is what my version of success is just loving people and serving them through art and gifting them art to bring joy to their sad situation or just using it as an avenue for conversation to connect deeper with people. And I love whenever people ask me how I became an artist and I get to talk about nursing, and that starts with the heart to serve others. And it's just, yeah, it can be so much deeper than just surface level. And so relationship building in person, you don't have to wait for the perfect opportunity. It can be, just blessing the people who are already around you. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's just amazing that you really do like community is everything. And I think a lot of people think like that's not what they need to talk about. But in reality, like, I love that that's your version of success, but I also love that you're aware of it. And like, I just think back to, why you got into nursing and then why you got into art. And it's like, there's just such this through line. And I think that ability to connect with people and share a story or share an emotion or share something like that's so true to you. But I also think that's why people connect with you, connect with your art. It's because there's more depth to it, there's more there. And I think that's something that's so beautiful, but also something that you've had the courage to say and to do. I think a lot of people are scared to do that. Like they're scared to build the community, to put themselves out there, to talk about why they're creating what they create. And I think it's something you've done beautifully. And I think that's why you've met so many incredible people and like had so much success. And kind of speaking to that, I know, like, for example, goals are important and you've crushed your goals. So we don't even need to go into that. But like, one in particular is you really wanted to work with more designers. And I know you had like one designer in particular who was like total I don't know, like shooting
Dream.
star, and then you worked together. So can you talk about like how that came to be and what that felt like?
That was the biggest moment. I've admired his work for a very, very long time and have all his coffee table books and all the things. And the story of how I met him is actually so funny and borderline embarrassing. I was at Scott's and it was my very first month, and I remember I just saw this guy walk by and didn't really recognize him at first and just made conversation like I would have made anybody else, and talked about going to Sanford and he went to Auburn, and we were just talking, and he said, "Yeah, I own a small shop in Perry, Georgia." And I'm thinking, I've heard of a guy from Perry who looks sort of like you. And the pieces are starting to come together. And I said, "What's your name?" And he told me his name, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." I said, "I only have all of your books." And for some reason, I don't know why I said this. I could have complimented any of his rooms, any of his design spaces, but all I said to him was, "You know what I love about your designs?" I said, "I love your use of fresh fruit in your staging." Why I said that. He was like, "Yeah, Publix does a great job when it comes to the lemon bowls." I'm like, why did I say this out of all his beautiful stage spaces? Had to comment on the fruit. But he ended up just laughing and ended up purchasing 8 pieces of art that day.
Amazing.
And I still see them, some of them in his store. And it was very, very surreal. And I think, a lot of it was right place, right time. But once again, I think that was just God giving me a little wink, like I've got you, and
Yeah.
you listened to my call, and this is just a happy little memory to make. And so that was a really, really, really cool moment for me. And probably I would say my favorite moment of my career so far.
Well, it really stands out for me because I think something you do really well is you put in the work, but you also speak your goals into existence. I remember we were on a call, or maybe, I don't think it was the club. I think it might have been one-on-one, but doesn't matter. And you were saying, you're like, "Oh, this is like the dream. Like, I would love to work with him. I would love to work with designers, all this stuff." And I was like, "You can. Like, you have the work. We just got to figure out how to get in front of these people."
Yes.
And I think sometimes it's like the doors open when you least expect them. And it's like, because I think you were putting it out there, it could have been him, it could have been anyone, but you were ready to work with a designer because you put it out there into the world. And then, lo and behold, the right one is put right in front of you. And so I think that's really amazing, but I also think that's something for people to hear, like, speak your goals into existence, and then you're ready when they appear in front of you.
Totally. Like have the groundwork laid so whenever the opportunity comes up, you're ready for it. And I even think that's, good advice to carry with you through slower seasons of art, because business is, you know, it comes and goes in seasons just like anything else. It's like, I think we all know the spring and the fall are pretty nonstop. And then the summer and the winter tend to die down. I'm thinking about it more now, and I'm like, well, this summer hasn't been super calm and the holidays are crazy, but there is an ebb and flow. And I think it's easy to get discouraged during the times whenever it's not as crazy, but that is such valuable time just to build on the foundation of your business, because you're going to need that foundation whenever things inherently get crazy again, whether that's cleaning up your social media and post on social media more. Those little things that kind of get lost whenever we're so busy painting, I think are just super, super important steps to take during the quiet times so that you're ready for those major opportunities to come your way.
Yeah. How are you from like a kind of technical perspective planning out your days and your weeks? Because I know obviously Scott's like a monthly market is a huge part of it, but how are you balancing commissions, creating inventory, marketing, like maybe Instagram, as you said? I know you did a photo shoot, like you've done shows. Like, how do you balance all of it? Do you have kind of a routine or a system you stick to?
I'm getting there. It was a lot of trial and error. The biggest thing I did today is I hired a social media assistant, and she starts today. So
Love.
that is going to be huge, because I'm really embarrassed to admit how long it takes me to make a single Instagram post,
You're not
um,
alone.
or make a single reel. I'm like, there are people who are good at this, and just because I can do this doesn't mean I should do this. So
Hmm.
she starts today, and I'm very excited about that. But I think, I used to just not really have much of a routine whenever it comes to commissions, but I realized it's such a valuable way to kind of automate some income is whenever you space them out. And so I take, about one commission a week. Sometimes I'll do one every 2 weeks if it's a larger commission, just because I do paint one commission probably 3 to 4 days at a time. And so that seems like an appropriate timeline for me. So it's nice because I'll know what my next 3 to 4 months look like. All I said, try to do commissions one a week, and I try to paint every single day. Does that always happen? No, but in a perfect world, it would. I try to kind of treat Tuesdays like my office day because I have my art coaching club call that day. And so it's a day that I'm already at my computer. And so that's really my time to try to prepare content for the next week or work on
Mhm.
emails and update my website, things like that. But yeah, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I try to paint at least for a few hours. Usually I'll wake up in the morning, have a little morning routine, coffee, devotion, all of that. We'll answer my emails first thing in the morning, but then we'll go straight to painting and we'll paint for the large majority of the day. And so all that to say, I think the shows definitely, those weeks do kind of just become a cluster. You just never know what those weeks are going to turn into because I'm framing at midnight before my show. So definitely not as perfect as they seem, but on the weeks they're not show weeks, it definitely helps to kind of have that sort of routine in place.
Yeah, and I like that you have a routine where you kind of have a day that's your office day. The fact that you're painting as much as you are, which is crazy. I think a lot of artists come on this podcast and don't. Like they're like it's just hard to make time with everything else you have to do. But I
Right.
think a lot of your success, and I say this to artists all the time, like you're gonna be more successful if you paint more. Like you're gonna develop you're technically going to get better. You're going to develop more and more of a style. You're going to be able to paint quicker. You're going to be able to do more because that's the product that actually sells. And you have inventory for shows and things like that, which is so important. So I think that's a sounds obvious, but I think it's actually a really, really effective way that you've set up your calendar.
Thank you. I definitely, like I said, it's not always perfect, but I think, I used to just waste so much time on my phone every day, honestly,
Yeah.
because I would wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, I need to do, plan my Instagram post, which means I need to go through my camera roll which means you just get lost in the sauce.
Right.
And I would waste so much time. And so something about just kind of putting that all into one day, one clerical day. And even if it's 2 days, I mean, sometimes my Fridays, I don't paint very much because it's the weekend and I'm going out of town that afternoon or whatever. And I will just do office work that morning. That's more my flexible day is Friday. But just having one day a week where I know, hey, it's okay if I don't post on Instagram today. I've got Tuesday where I will for sure be able to work on that side of things. And I know we've talked about this a lot, but ChatGPT is truly my best friend
Oh
whenever
my
it comes
gosh.
to
Yeah.
scheduling and improving clerical efficiency because I'm not naturally that great at the social media side of things, the technology side of things, and that really helps automate things for me big time.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's like the assistant that we all need, especially artists. Some of us struggle with organization or with the social media side. It can fill in a lot of those gaps, which is so nice because that's time we have back in the studio. Well, this all is incredible, but just for realistic sake, I'm sure you have hit some challenges. Can you talk about different challenges you've come across and maybe the ways you've worked through them or maybe you're still working through them?
Absolutely. I feel like, well, first of all, my biggest challenge was overcoming imposter syndrome. I think for a while I just felt like, oh, I'm a nurse who paints. I'm not an artist. And I think that took a lot of just overcoming that temptation to compare yourself. And I think the biggest thing I had to remember was I can't compare my chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. I've only been a full-time artist for a year and I have to remember that there's so much, left to do. There's so much more room to grow. And so I think that's something that a lot of us fall into, especially with social media and just the ever present, comparison train. So I think that's definitely a big thing that I had to overcome. I mean, that's how I feel. It's just there's so much power in unplugging. And I
Yeah.
think we live in a world that's just do more, be more, post more, email more, paint more. It's like you just feel exhausted because you're on this train of never ending. I remember I've listened to an audiobook while I paint called 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals. It was that whole idea that the more efficient you become, you think you'll have less work, but really you've just gotten better at doing hard work, so you end up with more work. And
Hmm.
it's like, when is the time to live the life that you've worked so hard to live, the life that you want to live? And so I think my biggest thing has just been, you know, trying to get off my phone for the sake of comparison, for the sake of becoming a machine or trying to keep up. I think that that was really a struggle I had to overcome and realize, yes, my phone is a tool for so much benefit, but it's also a tool for a lot of evil. And you have to just realize my phone doesn't control me. I control my phone and I control what goes in my mind and I control, the content that I see. And, I'm not I'm not a prisoner to my phone. And so I think that a lot of us benefit whenever we just take time away to unplug and to get back into nature and to find the things that light our spark and make us feel creative again. Because I think I definitely struggled with that imposter syndrome and I struggled with the comparison and was losing myself. And so whenever I just unplugged and looked at not all the noise around me, but looked at who I was inside and the things that I already loved, I found a lot of freedom in that.
Yeah, well, and I think it relates back to what you were saying earlier about knowing what your version of success looks like, because I think I'm totally with you. I think, especially as a coach and people, my whole job is like helping people be better, be more efficient, like do X, Y, and Z. But I always come back to, but what is your version of success? Because, like you said, if you know, hire someone to do your social media and you're using ChatGPT and all this stuff, it's like, great, you have all this time back. What are you going to do with it? Because I think the easy choice, or what I see most people fall into, is they just refill that time with like more and more and more work. When in reality, it's like, okay, maybe it's half time that goes to work, but then half, like, go live your life, probably to not be working all the time. And so I think that's a really important point you just made. And it's something I work through, and I work through with so many artists. It's like, come back to why, what does success look like to you? Is it spending time with your family or going on that vacation or taking every Friday off? Like, can you
Yes.
commit to that?
I just think that time is the one thing that you can't get back. And it's the one thing that everybody wants the most of, but feels like they have the least of. And
Totally.
I think that, there's so much, value in it might feel wrong and it might feel countercultural, but, realize nobody is managing your time for you. It is just you at the end of the day. And when you lay your head on your pillow at night, what truly matters the most to you? If that's family, if that's your spouse and your marriage, if that's spending time with your pets or your friends or whatever that looks like, traveling, it's like life is too short not to completely invest in those things first, and everything else will feel like it's been added. And that's a spiritual principle I take with me all the time is seek first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added. And I think it's the same. Seek first what matters the most to you. And then you won't feel so empty or like you're running on fumes trying to continue to make it through. It's like you'll just feel very fulfilled. And working out of a place of fulfillment is so much more effective than working out of a place of emptiness. It's so
Exactly.
funny because when we become a machine, our work suffers. But whenever we do less, we're actually able to do more in a really funny way.
I literally was writing about that this morning and kind of reflecting on it because it's so true. I think I've just read this book called Slow Productivity, but it's like when we can slow down, we can be more productive, we can create better work, we can be our best selves. And it just comes back to this idea of, I don't know, I feel like money is an easy example. It's like you can work harder and you can make whatever that next threshold is, but if it's not, like, at what end? Like, is it getting you something, or is it just taking more of your time so you can't even enjoy whatever it is that you're working towards? Like, that's what I always come back to. I'm like, well, what's going to make me happy right now? Is it working the extra 3 hours to get the extra thing done, or is it going to be ending work a little early and like going on the boat or going for a walk? And again, it's just coming back. It's like we're circling this success thing, and I think it's really important.
For me, I know that you made a great point a few months ago that I've taken with me of like, if success to you looks like taking off the whole month of December and enjoying Christmas, then do it. If it looks like taking off the summer, then do it. For me, it looks like I don't start till 12 on Mondays and I leave at 12 on Fridays. I don't work after 12 on Fridays. And that's my built in kind of way vacation, I guess you could say. Yes, we still travel and take vacations every now and then, but that's where like I know that I will have until 12 to just ease into my week, not burn myself out at the beginning of the week, really organize myself and pray through my tasks for that week. It kind of sets the tone of a softer week, I guess, instead of
Yeah.
just hitting so hard week after week, because that's not the nature of artwork, just to be this machine. It's really just kind of nurturing that artist within you, I guess, to build in that rest. So you can look forward to that and know that that's kind of some reprieve that comes whenever things get really busy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone finds their own version of that that works for them. Like, I feel like I am off the grid on the weekends. Like, you cannot reach me for the most part. But also, I'm the same way where every once in a while I'm like, we're gonna start a little late on Monday. I don't schedule stuff early Mondays. We're gonna start a little late on Fridays. We're gonna, like, I don't work super late. I'm a morning person. Like, I just do things that work for me. And I think
Right.
that was something I definitely had to overcome. I mean, you had a different schedule to begin with, being a nurse, so I don't know if you relate, but I very much felt like I needed to work 9 to 5-ish to feel worthy of doing this full time because that's what all my friends were doing. Like they were at their job from 9 to 5. And so I felt like if I wasn't filling all of my hours with quote unquote work, I wasn't working hard enough. When in reality, being an artist, a lot of the stuff we do doesn't fit into this mold of sitting at a computer work. It's like you have to go find inspiration. You have to go make 18 bad paintings to create a good one. And so a lot of that was like I had to really overcome that. And it was hard for me, but I feel like we're getting there,
I know.
7 years
Well,
later.
it's something that I think everybody experiences. Like I would, bring my little scribble journal, which I think every artist should have a little scribble journal. You just write all your ideas
Like
down.
everyone right here.
Yeah, exactly. That I've had many of those, and I would be so bad about taking them with me, downstairs to the couch in the morning, first thing in the morning, and then, late at night, I'm still working on stuff. And that's not to say that you don't have creative moments other times than the hours of 9 to 5, but I do think that there is something to be said about just protecting your peace and protecting your free time. Because I remember you were interviewing Kelsey Howard, and she was also a nurse, and she was saying, whenever your hobby becomes your job, you do need to find a new hobby or you will burn yourself out. And I think a lot of what I was suffering from was, yeah, art was my job, but it was still a hobby and it was still something I enjoyed. So I was just doing art 24/7.
Yeah.
And I think, realizing like, okay, this is my job. It's a blessing that I get to enjoy my job and that it doesn't feel like work, but I do need to turn it off at a certain point to be able to refill my cup and, take a walk outside, look at the leaves, paint the leaves, just do things
Yeah.
to kind of ground myself and kind of get out of the headspace that you kind of get wrapped up in when you're building a business because it is a lot of work.
Yeah. No, I love that. Can you share what you're working on next, what you're thinking about, what is on the horizon for you,
Yeah.
for your business, all this good stuff?
Gosh, it's been a big season of firsts. Like I had my very first collection drop in April, hired my first employee, got my first gallery, sold to my first celebrity, had my first pop-up. I've just had so many firsts in like the last 2 months, which is just crazy. And so it's funny coming off the tails of that because I'm like, what do I do next? Got into my first gallery and moved in last week. And I realized that the gallery partnerships are just so valuable because you don't have to be there and they do market for you. That's their job, is to sell your work. And so I definitely think I would love to get into more galleries. That's definitely on the docket. And I didn't necessarily even plan to get into this one. It was the way that I met the gallery owner and it just all came to fruition. So I think I'd definitely love to do more galleries. I have a fall collection coming up, which I'm so excited about
Yeah.
because it's similar to what I've been doing. It's still in my style, but just a little bit of a different composition, which I'm excited about. I'm getting to go to Portugal with you in November. Excited about that. Big dreams eventually would be, of course, to be in a designer show house one day. That is like my number one dream.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll do this again in a few years and I will have done it. I don't know. But that's definitely a big dream. And I do think it'd be fun to paint on something. I don't really know what that looks like, but maybe
Mhm.
that's textiles. Maybe that's, muraling.
I love it. Well, this has been incredible. I love to end every episode with a tip, a lesson, something beyond everything you've already shared that's really helped you in your art career. Is there anything that comes to mind that you could share with the
Yeah.
audience?
Yes, I would say find your people that you trust, that you believe have your best interest at heart. I think, being a full-time artist, you do get lonely sometimes because it's a one-person job. And so, going from a job where I had a million coworkers to being alone, it can be very isolating. And I think just finding that community of people that build you up and who you can share your bad ideas with, your good ideas with, who will tell you if something's not worth your time or if you need to be doing more of something is so important. I found a lot of that through the art coaching club. So my tip would be to join the art coaching club. But, through even little things like Scott's or the Founder Society, I went to that little night at the floral shop that y'all had and met my
Yeah.
friend Heather, who has Oh So Lovingly. And we've met at least once a month ever since we met the
Wow.
first time, and we've gone through the Artist's Way together, that book, which I recommend everybody read because it's amazing. But that's a super vulnerable book, and the fact that I feel so open with her to be able to tell her my pipe dreams with art and tell her the next thing I'm working on and just feel like it's in a safe space, that's so valuable to me. And so I would just say find your group of people. People call it a brain trust, and it's a small group of people that I really feel like I can be 100% myself with in every way. And so just find your people at all costs would be my biggest tip and trick.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it can be a really lonely job, but it also doesn't have to be. Like, I feel like if you asked me 3 years ago, I'd be like, I work for myself. I am alone all day. But I think if you asked me now, I have 10 people at any moment. I could, you being one of them, I can call up, I can text, I can, if I have a question, I feel like I can get a very candid answer. But
Yes.
also, they're your friends, but they're people that are doing cool stuff that you feel like you can lean on, and it's amazing to even know them. And I completely agree with everything you said. I think finding your community, whether that be in your area or like through groups, I just think you've done such a great job of putting yourself out there to find those people. And I think that's something a lot of people can like take away from this conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to kind of harp on the hard parts of owning a business and starting an art business because it's a lot of work. It is 24 hours a day sometimes, and I really do understand that exhaustion. But, there's so many blessings in it. Like, I get to be self-employed. I get to design my day, my month, and my year. I mean, that is of the ultimate value to me. And I think sometimes it's nerve-wracking to put yourself out there to find community, but 9 times out of 10, there's people that are looking for you to be their friend. There's so many artists who just want community. And so just having that audacity to DM somebody or ask somebody to coffee or to lunch, the community that I've built without even meaning to has just been incredible. And they're some of my best friends. Don't be scared, I guess, is what I would tell people to put yourself out there, just connect with people who are going through the exact same things you're going through, building a business, good and bad.
Yeah,
So
I love it. Well, this has been amazing. Can you share how everyone can learn more about you? So, your social handles, your website, the best ways for people to reach you.
I would say my first would be Instagram. I'm SK Isbell Art. My last name is not spelled the way it's pronounced. It's Isbell. I hopefully will be looking amazing because my social media assistant is just incredible
Love it.
and she's helping me learn how to, post reels and some day in the life. So a lot of fun things coming there. And then my website is skisbellart.com, and that's where my fall collection will be, and that's where my little about page is, which tells a little bit more about my story and all of that. So those are the primary ways to find me. I'm on Facebook and hope to be more on Pinterest and TikTok soon too.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was great. I feel like I learned so much more about you.
It's so interesting. It's like you feel like you know people so well, but there's just always something you don't know. And there's something you can learn from everybody, which is just amazing.
No.
There's a million different things that contribute to where people get today. So it's so neat to learn about people. So thank you for having
Yeah.
me.
Well, thank you for coming. This was so fun.